Our Universalist heritage proposed that each person is made of divine goodness. Science offers that we are stardust. Whatever your beliefs, know that you are a gift inherently of love. You're a gift, and we are so glad that you chose to be here today, whether in person or online, or even catching up with us later. Love is the spirit of all souls. It's something that this congregation has said every single Sunday since 1903, and we mean it. So in this moment of our shared journey, may you feel witnessed and honored wherever you are on that journey. I invite you now to please rise and greet your neighbor with your name and your pronouns, and greet each other online in the chat. Welcome, Crossing Bridges Band. It was wonderful. Buen día, mi gente. A good morning and a welcome to all who are with us. I'm the Reverend Katie Romano Griffin. My pronouns are she, her, or ella. And I am so grateful to be the senior minister here at All Souls. People of all ages are joyfully welcome to service. Nursery care is available if that option works best for you, and we will be singing our children out after the story in today's service as they go to attend classes if they choose. There's a couple of other great folks that I need to introduce this morning, including Wanja Waweru, who is a map maker who believes in using geospatial data to help understand the world around us. Wanja is a strong supporter of the power of data to help us uncover patterns within our society and to be a tool that helps us move towards a more just world. In her day job, she uses this data to help folks around the state of Indiana prepare for natural disasters. And Wanja has been a regular attendee of All Souls with her husband Nathan up in the AV booth since January and joined as a member in July. Welcome, Wanja. And let us also welcome All Souls member Fran Quigley, who is a clinical professor at the Indiana University Robert H. McKinney School of Law, where he directs the Health and Human Rights Clinic. Fran and his students advocate for the human right to housing. They do so by directly representing low-income persons facing eviction from their homes and defending their right to safe and healthy housing conditions, and also by promoting policy changes to ensure all people have access to a safe, affordable home. And you're going to learn. You're going to learn about how hard and how important that work is, especially right here in our neighborhood and in Indianapolis. You're going to learn about that today. I invite you to sign up for the September 22nd blood drive in the social hall today with Jim Scrimenti. If you're online or catching up with us later, please email Jim. Information is not only in the order of celebration, but it is in the know. Starting on September 13th, All Souls Movie Night will be held every second Friday of the month, with the exception of December. That's already a busy enough month, am I right? But at 6 p.m. in the social hall, you are going to be able to catch a movie every second Friday with folks. I'm sure there'll be popcorn and snacks. I hope you will join in, and thank you to Bev for coordinating. If you haven't yet, I invite you to complete a connection card. They are colored pieces of paper on the edges of the pews. There's also a digital one online available through the link tree. As we begin our time together, we acknowledge the land itself and those who've sustained it through the generations. We are upon the unceded land of the Lenape, Miamia, Kaskaskia, Shawnee, and Kickapoo people who were pushed from their land and whose children have been stolen for generations. As we strive to be a community of justice, may we continue to find ways to make real reparations. Please settle into this space with me to the words of poet Rainer Maria Rilke. Have patience with everything unresolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves as if they were locked rooms or books written in a very different language. Don't search for the answers which could not be given to you now because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now.
Our spirit play teacher, Kathy, is going to light our chalice. Thank you, Kathy. Today's our first day of getting of the children moving into their classes, so it's kind of an exciting day for us. And the Spirit Play classroom is all set up nicely. We have a Lego curriculum this year. Woo! I'll be in there too. I love Legos. Yes. This ritual of lighting our chalice reminds us to continually renew our promise, to live into our covenant, to put love into action, and to live out this community of love and justice that we certainly aim to be. So if you would please rise in body or spirit as we share the words that are printed in your order of celebration. They're in Spanish and English. And if you are with us online, please let us know where you are lighting your chalice from. We'll say the words in Spanish first. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia, y el servicio es su ley. Vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad en el amor, y ayudarnos unos a otros. Este es nuestro pacto. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This is our covenant. Thank you.
I have a children's story for you by Monica Gunning. It's called A Shelter in Our Car. And this may be a hard story for some of us to hear because maybe some of us have lived in our cars before. Maybe some of us have faced challenges with the immigration system. Maybe some of us have lost loved ones before, and that's deeply affected our financial situation. And maybe for some of us, this story will create an understanding that we didn't have before. But I invite you to care for yourself in this space in the ways that you need as I share this powerful story. Let us begin. Police cars are coming closer. The sirens hurt my ears. The light blinds my eyes. I jump up, really, really frightened. Shh, Zeddy, lie down, Mama says. We don't want to be noticed. We sink between the clothes in the back seat of the car. Mama, it's creepy sleeping in our car, I whisper. I know, she says. Things happen in the city. Police cars are always on some kind of chase, and she holds me close until the sirens stop. When all is quiet, Mama drives down Chandler Avenue and parks in front of a courtyard apartment house. Its garden is filled with flowers, bougainvillea, roses, hibiscus in the streetlights. Their colors are bright as the flowers in the yard we left behind in Port Antonio. Mom and I, we love parking in this spot. For weeks, there's a for rent sign that is hanging in one of the windows, and we asked about it last week, but the owner told us he'd only rent it to someone with a steady job, and he wants the first and last month's rent, which Mama doesn't have. Closing my eyes, I'm in dreamland, back in Jamaica. We're at a picnic on the beach, waves pounding against the rocks, crash and bang. I wake up. I'm not in Jamaica. I'm in America, and it's not the waves crashing against the rocks. Someone is knocking on our car window. What are you doing here? A policeman asks sternly. My little girl and I are stopping for the night, sir. No overnight parking here, he growls. Get moving. I will, sir, but we're not doing anything wrong, Mama says. She gets into the front seat and drives away. Tears roll down her cheeks like they did when Papa died. I lean over and stroke her locks. Mama, why don't we go over by Magnolia Avenue near the park? There the police don't even bother Mr. Williams when he sleeps on the bench. That's my girl, she says. I forgot about that place. She parks the car on Magnolia Avenue, and we slide down in the seats, and soon I'm asleep in her arms. In the morning, they wake and use the restroom at the park before it gets crowded. It's chilly in there and the water is cold, but they clean up anyway. Zeddy hums softly on a park bench as her mother braids her hair, and they have peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for the third day in a row. I wish we had hot chocolate, Zeddy says, the kind you used to make from cacao beans when we picked them near home. It makes me sad that you don't have some, Mama says as she looks in Zeddy's eyes. Do you remember the sun in Jamaica? How brightly it shone after a shower of rain? Zeddy remembers. Zeddy remembers that especially on cold, cloudy days like this day, the sun shone. And she wonders, why did Papa have to die? And why is it so hard for Mama now, going to community college and trying to find odd jobs? It's like having dark, wet days all the time. When I get a steady job, there'll be sunshine again, Mama says. But Zeddy's silent. She hears that from Mama all the time. But things are just hard. On the way to school, Zeddy asks her mom to drop her off at the corner behind the school because mean boys call their car junky and make fun of the flag in their window. Mama pulls over and tells Zeddy, "Pay them no mind, my child. Get your book learning just like your papa did and hold your head high. I'll take the flag down. Wait for me in the playground after school." When Mama picked up Zeddy after school, she shared that the temp agency was out of jobs again. Zeddy dreaded another night of PB&J, but Mama said that something good did happen. She handed out some flyers at a health fair so they could buy supper and gas for the car. And that night, Mama read to Zeddy from a book they found at the library. Sleeping in the car is better than a shelter, Zeddy tells Mama. I hated that noisy, crowded place. That's why I'd rather use our car, Mama answered. Zeddy snuggled beside her, and then Mama began to study for her exams. The next day, a school bully teased Zeddy, calling her Junk Car Zeddy, and he and his friend scared her so much she ran and ran away from the playground, down the street, and far into a corner. She saw Mama pull up to the playground, but she was too far when Zeddy yelled for her. Cold, bruised, and afraid, she cried harder and harder until a police officer came by, sat with her, and waited until Mama finally found her. They hugged. They shared their fear, and between tears, Zeddy forced a smile. She was just happy that she and Mama were together again. We both need to relax tonight, Mama said. I worked a long day at the health fair again, and they paid me more hours. So they drove to a cafeteria for spaghetti and ice cream and slept in a real bed at a motel that night. Zeddy had her first shower in a while, and it was amazing. She wished she could have a shower every day. How would you like to sleep in a bed all summer? Mama asked. At the health fair, the woman there offered Mama a job. It's for a program that helps people like Mama and Zeddy who work hard to find homes. We'll be able to afford a room, Mama explains. Oh, Mama, will you be able to save for the courtyard apartment while you work there and study too? Zeddy asked. I hope so, Mama said, and hugged Zeddy tighter. Zeddy nestled into Mama's arms. Mama, I'm sorry for being mean sometimes. She snuggled closer, falling asleep knowing that with or without an apartment, she and Mama had each other.
creators of justice and joy. For young and for old, a place at the table, a voice to be heard, a part in the song. The hands of a child in hands that are wrinkled, for young and for old, the right to belong. And God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy, compassion and peace. Yes, God will delight when we are creators of justice, justice and joy. Joy, joy, joy. For everyone born, a place at the table, to live without fear and simply to be, to work, to speak out, to witness and worship. For everyone born, the right to be free. God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy, compassion and peace. Yes, God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy. 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 Justice and joy.
Good morning. So as Reverend Katie said, I'm Wanja. I think I've had the pleasure of meeting most of y'all. But today, once the slides are up, I'm going to do a quick, awesome walk through the neighborhood around All Souls. So I heard that when Rev Katie first joined the congregation, there was a talk about looking at the folks who live in and around All Souls. So for the next few minutes, I'm going to dive a little bit into this data about who makes up the neighborhood around the church, which I'm sure includes many of you here. So for reference going forward, if you look at this map, the star is where the church is. The inner dark blue blob is going to be all the areas within a 5-minute drive of here. And then going out, the lighter blue blob is all the places that are within a 15-minute drive. So I know that data is just one part of the story. As many of us know, there's sometimes a bias in the way it's collected and made accessible. But it's a very useful tool, I think, in getting a look at the space around us. So next, first and foremost, we should get an idea of how many people actually live around us. So within that 5-minute drive, there's about 50,000 different people. And then if you spread out to 15 minutes from here, there's about 364,000 people. I actually was quite surprised by this, but as the previous map showed, this 15-minute drive area encompasses like the whole northeast corner of Marion County. So it's quite a few people. This map on the bottom right shows the population distribution within the 15-minute drive. These little block areas that you see kind of divided out are census tracts. So if you're not familiar with that, these are areas that represent typically between 2,500 and 8,000 people. You can think of them as neighborhoods, and all this data is from the Census Bureau. And the Bureau divides the data up in this way so that when you're filling out your census and reporting your data, you're not individually identifiable. All this data is from like the 2020 census and also the American Community Survey. So looking back at the map, the darkest areas are where there's the highest population in our neighborhood. So you can see it's mostly to the north in the area around us, and then the areas with lower populations are kind of to the southwest. All right, so our neighbors come from all different backgrounds. These maps here show the different races and ethnicities of our neighbors. And all of these, the darker colors, represent areas with a higher proportion of folks who identify as a certain race. So for instance, in the top left, the darker the brown, the higher population of folks who identify as white. So you can see that all in that northern band. The next map, the darker the orange, the higher population of folks who identify as black. You can see that's kind of flipped. It's the folks who are kind of living south of here. The darker greens in the next map to the right are the areas where folks identify as Native American. The next map on the bottom left, the darker the blues, the more folks who identify as Asian. Next, that middle map, the darker the purples, the more folks who identify as multiracial. And then the last map in the bottom right, the darker the grays are where folks identify as Hispanic. And that's irregardless of race. So as you're aware, this is important because a lot of historic economic injustices like redlining and racial covenants, these are things that limit people's abilities to access housing and gain wealth, are targeted based on race. Hence the importance of seeing the areas in our neighborhood where folks might have been historically disenfranchised. There's a lot of discussion about how well the census actually captures race, but again, this baseline data set gives us an understanding of how the area around us generally looks. All right, so next, this map here shows that a majority of our neighbors were born here in the US. So these bar graphs that you're gonna see on the right give us a chance to look at how our neighborhood compares to Marion County, which is what the dark gray color represents, and then the state of Indiana as a whole, which is what the lighter gray bar at the bottom represents. So you can see our neighborhood, the top two bars are about 93% of folks were born here in the US. That's pretty on par and similar to the rest of the state. I thought this map was pretty useful because folks who may not have been born in the US may not yet be citizens, and they might not be able to speak English well. So in these instances, they can face additional barriers accessing resources if they're in need, or enduring challenges when seeking out educational and employment opportunities. Right? So now for these next set of maps, we're gonna turn more to housing. So this map here shows areas where a lot of our neighbors are renters. So on average, across the wider neighborhood, again, that 15-minute drive, about 50% of folks are renters. But in the area just north of here, you can see that darker color right above the star, those two census tracts there. These are where we have over 77% of folks who are renters. We have a lot more renters in our neighborhood than the state of Indiana as a whole. That bar chart, again, on the bottom right shows that only about 30% of folks across the state of Indiana are renters, but about, again, 50% of our neighborhood are. So now for the flip side. As you could probably conclude, for the most part, if folks are not renting, then they are owning their homes. While, again, about 50% of those folks are renters, we can see that there are still pockets of owners, there's still pockets of high ownership, particularly kind of to the northeast of where we are, and then also the far east. And these dark colors, in case it's a little challenging to see the numbers, are where between 84 and 98% of folks own their homes. All right, so next. Is there a difference between renting and owning when it comes to how much folks are spending on their housing? Well, in our neighborhood, we can see the map on the left. This is just the 5-minute drive in particular. This map on the left is showing the proportion of one's income that they're spending on their housing. The one on the right shows the percentage of income that folks are spending on their housing if they're owners. So purple is renters, and then orange is owners. One thing that's important to note here, the darker colors for renters are over 30% for a lot of them, and according to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, if you spend more than 30% of your income on housing, then you're considered to be burdened, housing burden. This means that you might have challenges affording other things like food and medical care and transportation. So if we're looking at this kind of metric, we can see that most of the rent burden areas in our community are just south of here. And so this next map kind of blows us out to that 15-minute drive, so a little bit further away. So the rates on average across these neighborhoods are pretty similar to the previous map. About 33% of folks spend about 33% of their income on rent, and only about 17% of their income on housing. At this scale, we can also see that the renters, the darkest of purples in this map here, are where folks spend between 46 and 51% of their income on housing. In the orange map, which represents ownership, the darker oranges are areas where folks spend between 24 and 40% of their income on rent or owning their homes. So a lot of these folks in these darkest areas on both maps within our neighborhood are where you could consider them to be burdened by their housing costs. All right. So if folks are spending a decent portion of their money that they take home on rent or owning, then what is the baseline that they're even drawing this money from? So this map here shows that about 1 in 8 households across our neighborhood, that 15-minute drive, have folks who are living below the poverty line. The blue areas are places where, the darkest blues, are areas where folks are spending between 39 and 65, where folks, between 39 and 65% of folks are living below the poverty line. This is about on par with the state of Indiana as a whole, but a little bit less than Marion County. So yeah, our neighborhood is about similar to the state as a whole, but a little bit fewer folks living in poverty compared to Marion County as a whole. So this might actually, if you think back to some of those racial pattern maps we look at, you might see some similar overlaps there, but we can see here that there's this pretty stark contrast between where there's high concentrations of folks living in poverty between the north and south areas of our church. It's almost like we're like a dividing line there. Next. So we know that there are households in our community that are burdened by housing costs. We can then look at how this can impact housing stability, so to speak. So these maps here on the left show the number of eviction filings that were filed between 2021 and 2023 within that 15-minute drive of here. The map on the right shows the number of eviction judgments in that same time frame. So the data of these maps all come from the eviction dashboard that was recently developed by the Polo Center. I encourage you to look it up if you're interested, and an organization called New America. It's available online, and it actually has eviction and foreclosure data for the entire state of Indiana between 2021 and 2023. So in our neighborhood, we can see that in just those 3 years, there were 28,079 eviction filings, and 12,466 of those reached the point of an eviction judgment. So now we can look almost on the other side of it, or extend this story a little bit, and we can see that this map here shows areas where there were foreclosures in that same time frame, again within 15 minutes of here. Between 2021 and 2023, there were 1,113 foreclosures within that 15-minute drive of where we are today. I wanted to note the 2 areas that are the darkest, so had the highest number of foreclosures that stood out. One area is around 75th Street and Westfield Boulevard, and the other area is around Binford and 65th Street. Again, these areas, in both of these spots, there were between 74 and 121 households that experienced eviction. So now we move to the last map. I thought it would be helpful to do kind of a joint overlay of the number of foreclosures and eviction judgments. So as we saw in the last map, this might look a little overwhelming, but I will explain it. The darker the blue, the more foreclosures. The darker the red, the more eviction judgments. And what we settle on with the dark purple at the top, when you overlay these two, is all the places within a 15-minute drive where there are a high number of foreclosures and evictions co-occurring. So this can be thought of with that logic of the places with the most unstable housing. So this wasn't like a statistical analysis, it's just a visual overlay of these 2 variables, but it kind of goes to show that we can come to an understanding about what our neighborhood looks like when we dig a little deeper at this closure scale. Hopefully this helps us to better see how we here at Also can be good stewards of the needs of those folks living just a few minutes from where we sit today, which includes, like I mentioned, many of us here. Thank you.
The first verse is going to be sung in Spanish. Cuando el pobre nada tiene y hambre parte. Cuando alguien pasa sed y agua nos da. Cuando el débil a su hermano fortalece. Va Dios mismo en nuestro mismo caminar. Va Dios mismo en nuestro mismo caminar. Verse 2 in English. When compassion gives the suffering consolation. When expecting brings to birth hope that was lost. When we choose love, not the hatred all around us. We see God here by our side, walking our way. We see God here by our side, walking our way. 3 in English too. When our spirits like a chalice brim with gladness. When our voices full and clear sing out the truth. When our longings free from envy seek the humble. We see God here by our side, walking our way. We see God here by our side, walking our way. When the goodness poured from heaven fills our dwelling. When the nations work to change war into peace. When the stranger is accepted as our neighbor. We see God here by our side, walking our way. We see God here by our side, walking our way.
Thank you. I invite you to breathe into this space, or to center yourself in a way that is comfortable for you and your body. As we take the time to acknowledge the joys and the sorrows in our own hearts, the joys and the sorrows of the world and this community. In the spirit of joy, let us celebrate the birthdays this week in our community. Lydia and Elena, Yuko and Rose, Ian and Nadia are also having birthdays this month, and I saw on Facebook, Cecile Dar is having a birthday, or had a birthday. I'd love to wish a happy 36th anniversary from this community to Jean and Matt Miller. And the sorrows in this community are many. Those that we know include that Helen Dwyer is in the hospital and would love calls, cards, visits. Give her a ring. If you need her contact info, let me know. But I'm sure if she's still there, hopefully she'll be out today. But if not, a call and a visit would be most welcome. And also, I am sure on our hearts is the continued bombings in Gaza, the school shooting this week in Georgia, the shooting in Harford County, Maryland High School, and the shooting last evening in Lexington, Kentucky. 3 mass shootings, 4 days. Let us remember also the shootings that happen on our streets every day. Let us hold a moment of silence together for the joys and the sorrows in our hearts, named and unnamed, And when the song begins, as Gabe shared last week, let us sing this song, There is a Love, to ourselves and then to each other. And those who are mourning the loss of a loved one, who would like to be recognized, you're invited to rise in body or spirit during this song.
There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all I rest in this love. Let's do that again. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all I rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding us. I rest in this love. We rest in this love.
So I was privileged to get an advanced peek at Wanja's amazing maps earlier this week about our local economic geography. So in keeping with that theme of what's going on all around us in our community, I'd like to tell you about a human rights violation that occurred about 8.4 miles from where we are right now, definitely within that 15-minute drive radius. And this site was Warren Township Eviction Court, and the date was Thursday. The human rights victim that I want to share with you about, this is not her real name, but I'll give her the name Jasmine Weber. Jasmine's a mom with 2 kids. One of her kids has some pretty significant behavioral issues, and that's kept Jasmine from keeping her day job. She's had to go to the school several times. She can't leave this young man home alone very easily, and she ended up losing her day job. She started doing Instacart and some part-time work and was cobbling things together and was able to make rent most months, but was paying way more than the 30% recommended amount. Like a lot of folks we see in eviction court, she'd been paying 70%, 80% of her income just to make rent each month. And she managed, just like all the folks we see, she managed to juggle that for a really long time, just really incredibly, until she couldn't anymore. She had missed a car payment, the car got repossessed, she couldn't do Instacart anymore, had trouble getting to her part-time jobs, she missed rent. Her landlord filed for eviction a few days later, so we see her in Warren Township Eviction Court. And as Reverend Katie said, my students and I represent Jasmine and other folks. We see them in eviction court each week. And when she came to court, Jasmine was a little bit optimistic because she had finally gathered together the money to catch up on the back rent, but she found out, like a lot of folks find out, that the leases are written by the landlords. So the leases written by the landlord say she also owes late fees, and she also owes court fees, and she also has to pay her landlord's attorney's fees. And of course, what was Thursday? The start of a new month. She couldn't catch up, and she cried. And tears are something that we see, unfortunately, every single week in eviction court. And in fact, Jasmine's was one of 51 human rights violations that occurred in that very same court, that one court, on that one day on Thursday. 30 more occurred on Tuesday in that court. And then in Washington Township Court, just a few miles away from here, there was dozens more last week. In Center Township Court, there were dozens more. In Lawrence Township Court, all within our 15-minute drive, people were losing their homes by the hundreds. In fact, there's 500 new eviction filings in our county each week, 25,000 a year. And of course, they're not just numbers, right? They're Jasmine. And they're other neighbors of ours, every one of whom with a story like that. So this sucks. Reverend Katie said I could say that from the chancel. But beyond that, why is it not just bad luck? Why do I use the term human rights violation? Well, I don't use that term just because in almost every nation around the world, housing is considered to be a human right. And I don't use that term just because when you ask Americans, most of us think that housing is a human right. I use the term human rights violation because there's this very core injustice in our housing system that Wanja's maps got to the core of there. And that is that if you go to eviction court, and I'm going to ask you in a few minutes, invite you to do so, if you go to eviction court and you look around, you see who has government-subsidized housing. And it's not who you think. The judge has government-subsidized housing. The attorneys for the landlord who are evicting Jasmine and all the other folks, they have government-subsidized housing. I have government-subsidized housing. Because the secret is if we have a mortgage, if we're homeowners, that lower cost that Wanja pointed out in her maps, that's because of government intervention. That's because there's mortgage interest deductions, property tax deductions. If we sell our home, our homes have gone up on average across the country, $150,000 in value. Most of our wealth is in our homes. And if we sell the home, we don't have to pay taxes on that, on the gains up to $500,000 if you're a couple. And all of those come from the government acting, just like we have a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage, most of us do. Government action to create that, government-insured mortgages, all of which Jasmine doesn't get. And when you talk about the 30-year fixed-rate mortgage, we know where we're going to live next year if we're privileged to be homeowners, and we know what our monthly cost is going to be. She doesn't know that. None of our clients know that, because the landlord may put them out, the landlord may spike up the rent. And so we see that you look around that room, we all have government-subsidized housing. But our government subsidies actually are pennies compared to what the landlords, the corporate landlords who are evicting Jasmine and others have, because they're mostly corporate landlords. 88% of the cases, eviction cases we get filed in our county are from corporate landlords. The idea of a mom-and-pop landlord, frankly, is becoming obsolete. And if you look at corporate landlords and all the tax breaks, you see this cornucopia of benefits and subsidies that we provide. Again, political choices that we've made. Now, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to spend 2 hours in a class talking about that. You're welcome to come for a 2-hour class on tax benefits for landlords, but I'm guessing most of you don't want to do that. The students have to, right? But let me just give a list. The list is, we're going to talk about pass-through deductions, depreciation, capital gains tax benefits, opportunity zones, like-kind exchanges, stepped-up basis, estate tax exemptions, and more. It adds up to hundreds of billions of dollars a year that we provide to corporate landlords. Now, there's a very famous corporate landlord that may or may not be running for president, whose name we won't mention. We won't give that example, but I'll give you another example. There's a guy named Stephen Ross. Stephen Ross is one of the 150 richest people in the world. He's so rich he owns the NFL team, the Miami Dolphins. He used to be a tax lawyer. He figured out, wait a minute. He knew the tax saying, if you want to be rich but convince Uncle Sam you're poor, get into real estate. He became a real estate developer and landlord. And Stephen Ross, over a 10-year period, made $1.5 billion in real estate income. Guess how much he paid in federal taxes? Nothing. So we spend actually 5 times as much in tax expenditures on landlords and wealthiest homeowners than we do on low-income renters. And in fact, if you go back to that courtroom scene and you look and see who doesn't have a government housing subsidy, the only ones in there who don't mostly are Jasmine and the dozens of other people who are facing eviction. Now, it doesn't mean she doesn't qualify for one. She does. Her low income qualifies her for a housing voucher or for access to public housing or some kind of federal subsidy. But when it comes to federal subsidies for housing for poor people, we play this very cruel game. It's a cruel musical chairs game, really. It's that for every 4 households who are eligible for this assistance, we only give it to 1. The other 3 are the losers in that game because we don't fund these programs well enough. And those other 3 people who are the losers in the game, that's who we see in eviction court. That's who we see losing their homes. We don't treat housing like an entitlement. Some people know here in the room that Medicaid, if you qualify for it, you get it. If food stamps, SNAP, if you qualify for it, you get it. But for housing, for most people, it's not there for them. So what adds up to nationally is 17.5 million people live in households, like in the story that Reverend Katie shared with us, that are at risk of losing their homes because they're behind on their rent. And a lot of them are going to end up in eviction court. 17.5 million people is the population of Ohio and Indiana combined who are at risk right now of losing their homes, having to sleep in a car and a shelter on the street. So I know you didn't come to church on Sunday for a tax policy lesson, but when it comes to housing, the picture in eviction court and in the community, as Wanja described it, is what Dr. King described long ago. We all too often have socialism for the rich and rugged free market capitalism for the poor. Socialism for the rich and rugged free market capitalism for the poor is the best explanation I can give you for our housing system in our community and beyond. So this is depressing stuff. But let me close with this. It's very fixable. It's fixable if we choose to do so. We can make market rate housing more stable, more secure. We can make sure conditions are good in the rental housing. We can make sure that Jasmine and others can renew their lease if they want to. We can make sure that the rent increases are at a controlled level. And we can recognize that a lot of people are like Jasmine and other folks living on disability incomes or single parents. Children are by far the highest demographic of folks who are getting evicted. We can recognize at certain stages of their lives people can't afford market rate housing, and we can treat housing like we do food and health care and education, et cetera. And we can make sure that folks get subsidized housing if they're eligible for it and end that cruel musical chairs game. Because we already devote more than enough government housing money to do so. We're just subsidizing the wrong people. So how do we get there? Today's Share the Plate is with the Greater Indianapolis Multi-Faith Alliance, GEMA, and we can do more than just donate because GEMA actually is an eviction court watching and documentation program that is fueled by, run by people like us, volunteers from congregations around this community who go to eviction court, who document, who witness this injustice, who keep track of the data, and then if they actually have started to become advocates. And if you're interested in being involved in GEMA, I'm happy to make the connection for you. I know Reverend Katie can do the same because they need more people, and we have still much to do. Because the people in GEMA, the folks who are like us, actually have become more than just witnesses to this. They've become advocates. They've started to go to the State House. They've started to petition local officials to increase rent assistance. They've started to meet with judges. And they've become a group that is committed to stopping these human rights violations. These human rights violations that are happening to Jasmine and thousands of other neighbors like her, that are happening week after week, and that are happening right in our backyard.
captive path I lead, no matter where you go, I will find you. If it takes a long, long time, no matter where you go, I will find you. If it takes 1,000 years, no matter where you go, I will find you. In a land
I give to you the adapted words from the Reverend Tanya Shadira Marquez. We have opened the doors of this sacred space for you, the weary, the lonely, the hopeful, the young, the old, the seeker, the questioner, the hungry, and the thirsty for connection. We have called on the heart of this community to hold us and bring us comfort, to welcome us as we are and how we came today. And as we prepare to leave this space, let us be co-creators, this community of seekers, this community of wanderers. Let us go forth, remembering the heart of this community that holds us and brings us comfort. Let us go forth. Let us do good. Let us be our best selves. And when we err, let us make it right and move forward, doing the next best right thing. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be.
Go find a lover, run away, let your heart be your guide. You deserve the deepest of cover. You belong in that home by and by. You belong among the wildflowers. You belong somewhere out to sea, far away from your trouble and worry. You belong somewhere you feel free. You belong among the wildflowers. You belong somewhere close to me, far away from your trouble and worry. You belong somewhere you feel free. You belong somewhere you